Hello. I'm going to be going to Disneyland soon, and I decided I wanted to make my own mouse ears. So here's how I did it. I'm using a pattern here to trace and cut out all the pieces I need, and it'll be available in the description of this video. Here I'm cutting out 6 panels that'll form the cap. I got this surprisingly cheap hide from Tandy. It's called Gummy Boom leather. It's honestly a little weird, kind of a chrome tan leather. It's got a finished backside though, so it's pretty nice, and it looks good for the cap. I don't have to use a liner. Now let's trace out those circles for the ears. We need 4 in total. I'm also cutting out a few washers and 2 tabs that the straps are going to be attached to later. And while I'm working on them, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the edges of those tabs and the washers right now. Also, if you're following along with the pattern, there's an option to use an edge binding that'll wrap around the rim of the cap. It's not needed, but it makes the product look nice and finished. Now before I put anything together, I'm going to dye these ears a golden brown color. I won't need to dye the body panel pieces because they're already green. I'm also going to hit at that edge binding real quick. I also felt like the ears needed a little something extra, so I added this topography design, which I kind of like a lot. So it adds a little something. It's pretty neutral, but not so bland, you know? I like it. Next, I've marked a 3mm stitch line along each edge of all 6 panels. I'm going in and punching them now too. And punching this takes just a little longer because the edge has a gentle curve to it. So I just use the 2-prong and take my time. Next, I'm punching out the slot that the ears will be inserted into later. Now this design calls for eyelets, rivets, and a Chicago screw, so I'm punching all the holes for those now. And since I only need to attach ears to 2 of the panels, only 2 panels will be getting punches. The rest of them will be left alone. I'm about to mark the stitch line for the ears. I like to use a pre-punching method, so I punch them individually before I stick them together. I use the pattern to mark that arch stitch line, and with that done, I go in with my 2-prong and hug the edges. Also, I didn't have a thin enough leather for the edge binding I'll be using, so I'm skiving it down a bit, and then I'll go through and punch on both edges. With all that punching done, I'm going to apply some glue to the ears, and when I stick them together, I'm going to be careful not to close up that arched area yet. I need it open so I can add the stuffing after I stitch it up, which I will do now. I start this stitch from one corner of the arch, and I pause at the other corner of the arch. Then I use a bone folder to clean up any residual glue, and I begin with the stuffing. So I'm using a paper stuffing. You can use paper, you can use a plastic fiber, whatever works, whatever you have on hand. And with the stuffing filling out the edges nicely, I'll finish up the stitch and then I'll do the edge finishing as well. I like to sand, bevel, dye, and toke on all the edges before burnishing. Now let's attach these ears to the panels. I'm applying some glue to the top of the flaps and to the underside of the panel, where I will slot in the ears, fold over those flaps, and then rivet them in. it's time to stitch up the cap. For this design, you need individual stretches of thread for each seam. And I'm applying a baseball stitch. If you don't know how to do one, that's okay, there's plenty of tutorials online for it. But it's pretty simple once you see how it's done. Skipping the bottom hole, since that'll be used for the edge binding later, we start from the second up, go in from behind, and wrap the needle around and back under to the next panel where you'll shift up to the alternate hole. Repeat that with the next thread, coming out of the hole, underneath the next panel, and out of the next hole, and you'll get a baseball stitch. The thing about this stitch though is it's pretty loose to work with. You may find that you need to stitch it up a bit and then go back in like I am here to tighten things up. At the end, I stitch back and forth a couple times and then clip off the seam. So far, I've stitched all 4 of the blank panels together, and now I'm attaching the ear panels to the left side of each of these. And now with 2 identical pieces complete, we're going to spin it around and stitch them together. Next, I need to cover this stitching at the top of the cap. Here's where I'll use that Chicago screw. I'm sliding one washer onto the top piece of the Chicago screw, putting it through the crest of the cap, putting the washer on the other side, and securing it in. And now it's time for the long part, for several reasons. We've got this long piece of leather, and it takes a long time to stitch up. I'm applying some contact adhesive to the edge binding, as well as the inside and outside edges of the rim of the cap. Then, once that glue is ready to set, I'll begin at the back of the cap and start pinching that edge binding on, trying to keep the holes lined up best I can. And at the very end, I have a little extra material so I can overlap it. Now let's stitch this thing up. And now that that's finally done, I'm going to add these eyelets onto the strap tabs. And then I'm attaching the strap tabs to the cap via the holes underneath the ears using a rivet. And lastly, I'm measuring out some elastic, tying it onto the strap tabs, and that'll cap off this build. And here they are in action on yours truly. I love the green and brown color scheme. Kind of gives it a retro look. It's even reminiscent of some of those old leather Warriors helmets. The stuffed ears look great, and as mentioned earlier, the underside is already colored, so no lining. Overall, this was a very fun build, and I can't wait to wear them. Again, this pattern is available for download in the description of this video, and thank you so much for watching. Please like and share the video, comment if you have something to say, subscribe of course, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.